I sacrificed everything for her dream wedding. Then she called me an eyesore. So I gave her a real nightmare. Let me tell you about the day my daughter in law learned that calling me an eyesore was the biggest mistake of her entitled little life. I'm 73 years old, and I've seen enough to know when someone's showing you their true colors. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what came out of Ashley's mouth 3 weeks before her wedding to my son Marcus. You have to understand the whole story to appreciate what happened next. Because this wasn't just about one conversation or one insult. This was about years of building a relationship, making sacrifices, and slowly watching someone's mask slip until their true nature was revealed in all its ugly glory. I raised Marcus by myself after his daddy walked out when he was just 8 years old. That man, and I use the term loosely, decided that responsibility wasn't for him when the going got tough, left me with a mortgage, a pile of bills, and a little boy who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. I never did tell Marcus the real reason his father left. Some truths are too heavy for a child to carry. So there I was, 28 years old, working double shifts at Mercy General Hospital, cleaning floors and changing bed sheets, mopping up after surgeries, and doing whatever needed doing to keep food on our table. I wasn't trained for anything fancy, didn't have a college degree or special skills. What I had was a strong back, willing hands, and a determination that my son was going to have every opportunity I could give him. Those were hard years, let me tell you. I'd get home at midnight, bone tired and smelling like disinfectant, only to find Marcus still awake, waiting for me to help him with his homework. I'd sit at that little kitchen table, still in my uniform, helping him with math problems while my feet throbbed and my back ached. But seeing his face light up when he understood a concept, watching him grow into a smart, kind, ambitious young man, that made every sacrifice worth it. I saved every penny I could, clipped coupons, bought generic brands, wore the same winter coat for 15 years. While other women my age were getting their hair done and buying new dresses, I was putting money away for Marcus's future, college fund, emergency savings, little bits here and there that I hoped would add up to something meaningful. The other hospital workers used to shake their heads at me. "Dorothy," they'd say, "you need to live a little. Buy yourself something nice. That boy will be grown and gone before you know it." But I knew something they didn't. I wasn't just saving money. I was building a foundation for generations to come. When Marcus got his scholarship to Georgia Tech, I cried for 3 days straight. Happy tears, proud tears, relieved tears. All those years of sacrifice had paid off. My baby was going to be an engineer, then later switch to architecture. He was going to build beautiful things, create structures that would last long after we were both gone. I watched him graduate summa cum laude, watched him get hired by one of Atlanta's most prestigious architectural firms, watched him buy his first car, his first apartment, watched him become the man I dreamed he could be. And through it all, he never forgot where he came from. He'd call me every Sunday, bring me dinner every few weeks, include me in his life in ways that made my heart swell with pride. Put him through college, watched him become a successful architect, and felt nothing but pride when he told me he was getting married. Ashley seemed sweet enough at first, pretty girl from what she called a good family, which I later learned was code for family with money but no class. She'd smile in my face and call me Mama Dorothy whenever Marcus was around. But I noticed how that smile never quite reached her eyes. But I kept my observations to myself because I wanted my son to be happy. I'd learned over the years that sometimes love means biting your tongue, keeping your concerns to yourself, and hoping that time will reveal the truth without you having to point it out. The engagement happened on Ashley's 26th birthday at some fancy restaurant in Midtown that cost more for one meal than I used to spend on groceries for a month. Marcus had planned this elaborate surprise, complete with the restaurant staff, hidden photographers, and a ring that must have cost him 3 months' salary. I watched Ashley's face when he got down on one knee, and what I saw there wasn't joy or surprise or overwhelming love. What I saw was satisfaction, like she'd been waiting for this moment, expecting it, and was pleased that it had finally arrived on schedule. But Marcus was glowing with happiness, and the other diners were applauding, and Ashley was crying and saying yes. So I pushed my concerns aside and focused on being happy for my son. The next morning, Ashley called me before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Mama Dorothy, she practically shouted into the phone. Can you believe it? We're getting married. I'm so happy for you both, sweetheart, I said, and meant it, despite my reservations. I want you to be involved in everything, she continued. The dress shopping, the venue selection, all of it. You're going to be my family now, and I want this to feel like a celebration for all of us. That should have been my first clue that something was coming. Ashley had never shown much interest in my involvement in anything before, but suddenly she wanted me to be part of every decision. At the time, I thought it meant she was finally opening her heart to me. Now I know she was just setting the stage for what came next. When they got engaged, Ashley started talking about her dream wedding. And let me tell you, this girl had some dreams that reached all the way to the moon and back. She'd been planning this wedding since she was probably 12 years old, cutting pictures out of bridal magazines, creating Pinterest boards, building a fantasy that had very little to do with marriage and everything to do with being the center of attention for one perfect day. She wanted the whole fairy tale, and I mean everything. Designer dress from a boutique in New York that specialized in gowns worn by celebrities, five-course dinner prepared by a chef who'd trained in Paris, live jazz ensemble instead of a regular wedding band, flowers imported from Ecuador because the roses grown in Georgia weren't exotic enough, crystal chandeliers, silk linens, gold-plated charger plates, and enough candles to light up half of Atlanta. The venue she'd chosen was the Georgian Terrace Hotel, one of those historic places downtown that costs more to rent for one night than most people spend on their cars. The reception hall alone was $12,000, and that was before you added in all the extras she wanted: upgraded lighting, premium sound system, extended bar service, additional security, valet parking for all the guests. And speaking of guests, Ashley's list kept growing every week. It started at 75 people, family and close friends, she said. Then it became 125 because she couldn't possibly leave out her sorority sisters. Then 150 because Marcus's architectural firm colleagues needed to be included. Then 175 because her father's business associates expected invitations. Each new addition to the guest list meant more money, more food, more flowers, more rental chairs, more centerpieces, more party favors, more everything. The budget kept climbing like a rocket heading for space, and I watched my son's face get more stressed with every new expense Ashley discovered. The final price tag? $85,000. Let me say that again so it sinks in properly. $85,000 for one day. One single day that would be over in a few hours, but would cost more than most people's annual salary. Marcus nearly choked when she showed him the final estimates. We were sitting in their living room, Ashley with her wedding planning binder spread across the coffee table like battle plans, pointing to line items and vendor quotes with the enthusiasm of a general discussing military strategy. Baby, Marcus said, his voice tight with stress. That's more than some people's houses are worth. But it's our special day, Ashley pouted, using that little girl voice that she deployed whenever someone questioned her decisions. Daddy said he'd help, but with everything going on with his business, she trailed off, looking meaningfully at both of us. I could see what was happening as clearly as if it was written in neon letters across the sky. Ashley's father was having financial troubles. I'd heard whispers about it through the community grapevine, and the family money she'd been counting on wasn't as available as she'd expected. But she wasn't about to scale back her fairy tale wedding just because reality had intruded on her fantasy. Now, Marcus made good money as an architect, $65,000 a year, which was more than I'd ever dreamed of making in my hospital job. But even with his salary, $85,000 was still a massive stretch. It would mean loans, credit card debt, possibly years of financial stress just to pay for one perfect day. I watched my son's face fall as he tried to figure out how to make his bride-to-be happy without bankrupting himself for the next decade. I saw him running calculations in his head, trying to figure out what he could cut from his own life to make room for Ashley's dreams. And I saw the exact moment when he started to consider asking me for help. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. The decision that I'd later regret with every fiber of my being. I'll help, I said quietly. The words hung in the air for just a moment before Ashley's eyes lit up like Christmas morning, New Year's Eve, and the 4th of July all rolled into one spectacular celebration. Really, Mama Dorothy? That would be so amazing. Oh my God, Marcus, did you hear that? Your mom is going to help us. She jumped up from the couch and actually hugged me, the first spontaneous physical affection she'd ever shown me. And for just a moment, I felt like maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe she did care about me, about being part of our family. Maybe this wedding was going to be the beginning of a real relationship between us. How wrong I was about that. What I didn't tell them right then was exactly how much I could help. See, I'd been living modestly my whole life, but appearances can be deceiving. While everyone saw me as just another working class woman scraping by on a hospital salary, the truth was quite different. First, there was my grandmother's house. Grandmama had bought her little shotgun house in the old Fourth Ward back in 1945, when the neighborhood was rough and property was cheap. She'd paid $800 for it, money that took her 2 years to save from her job as a domestic worker. Over the decades, I'd watched that neighborhood change, watched it become gentrified, watched property values climb higher and higher. By the time Ashley was planning her wedding, that little house was worth over $250,000. And it was mine, free and clear, inherited when Grandmama passed 15 years earlier. Then there was my investment portfolio. Nothing fancy, nothing risky. I didn't know anything about stocks and bonds and all that complicated financial stuff. But I did know about putting money away regularly. And I'd been working with the same financial advisor at the local bank for 25 years. Every month, without fail, I'd put away whatever I could spare. $50 some months, 100 when I could manage it. Sometimes more when I picked up extra shifts. That advisor, Mrs. Chen, had explained to me about compound interest, about diversification, about the magic of time when it comes to building wealth. She'd put my money into conservative mutual funds, bonds, some blue chip stocks. Nothing exciting, nothing that would make me rich overnight, but steady, reliable growth that had accumulated into a substantial sum over the decades. Then there was the life insurance policy from the hospital. When I'd started working there in 1978, they'd automatically enrolled all employees in a group life insurance plan. The premiums were tiny, just a few dollars taken out of each paycheck, and I'd honestly forgotten about it for years. But the policy had a cash value component that had been growing steadily, and by 2019, it had matured into a nice little nest egg. Add it all together, the house, the investments, the insurance money, plus my regular savings account that I'd been feeding for decades, and I was sitting on just over $400,000 in total assets. Not millionaire money, certainly not enough to live like Ashley's family, but enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days without worrying about rent or groceries or medical bills. More importantly, it was enough to give my son the wedding his heart desired, or at least the wedding his fiancé insisted she needed. But here's what I learned about Ashley over the next several months. Giving her what she wanted was like feeding a fire. The more fuel you added, the bigger and hungrier it became. It started small, just a few extra touches, she said. The flowers weren't quite the right shade of blush pink. Could we upgrade to the premium roses that cost 50% more? The cake wasn't tall enough to make a proper impression. Could we add 2 more tiers? The venue lighting wasn't romantic enough. Could we rent additional chandeliers? Each request came with Ashley's trademark combination of sweetness and manipulation. She'd start with gratitude. Mama Dorothy, I'm so thankful for everything you're doing for us. Then move to explanation. I know it's a little more money, but this one change will make such a difference. And finish with emotional pressure. I just want our wedding to be perfect, and I know you want that too. And like a fool, I kept saying yes. When she decided she needed a second dress for the reception, because apparently one $4,000 gown wasn't enough for a single day, I wrote the check. When she insisted on flying her college friends in from California for her bachelorette party, because they're like sisters to me and I can't get married without them there, another $3,000. I covered it. When she decided the original band wasn't elevated enough and wanted to hire a jazz ensemble that cost twice as much because music sets the whole tone for the evening, I made it happen. Every week brought a new crisis, and every crisis came with a bigger price tag. The linens weren't luxurious enough. The silverware wasn't elegant enough. The party favors weren't unique enough. The photographer's basic package wasn't comprehensive enough. I watched my carefully accumulated savings account shrink with each new expense, but I told myself it was worth it. This was my son's wedding after all. This was going to be one of the most important days of his life, and if I could make it perfect for him, wasn't that what a mother should do? But the truth was, it wasn't really about Marcus at all. Oh, Ashley was clever about framing everything in terms of our special day and what Marcus deserves. But anyone paying attention could see that this wedding was all about her. Marcus would have been happy with a simple ceremony in our church and a reception in the fellowship hall. But Ashley needed a fairy tale, and she'd found someone willing to pay for it. By the time we were 3 weeks out from the wedding, I'd spent nearly $60,000. $60,000 of my retirement money, my security, my future. My nest egg was looking more like a cracked shell, but I told myself it was worth it to see Marcus happy. That's when Ashley decided to have the talk with me, the conversation that would change everything and reveal her true nature in all its ugly glory. She'd called me on a Tuesday morning, using that bright, cheerful voice that I now recognize as her manipulation voice. Mama Dorothy, could you come over this afternoon? I'm working on the wedding favors, and I could use some help. Plus, there are a few last-minute details we need to discuss. I should have known something was up by how nervous Marcus looked when I arrived at their apartment. He was pacing around the living room like a caged animal, picking up magazines and putting them back down, adjusting pillows that didn't need adjusting, avoiding eye contact with both Ashley and me. The wedding favors were spread across their dining room table, little bags of imported Jordan almonds from Italy that cost more per ounce than my weekly grocery budget. Ashley had insisted on these particular almonds because they were the same ones served at some celebrity wedding she'd seen in a magazine. Each little bag was tied with a silk ribbon and attached to a personalized thank you card printed on handmade paper. For 2 hours, we sat there stuffing almonds into bags, tying ribbons, and arranging cards. Ashley kept up a steady stream of chatter about the wedding, about how excited she was, about how perfect everything was going to be. But I could sense tension in the air, like the feeling you get right before a thunderstorm hits. Finally, after we'd finished the last favor bag, Ashley cleared her throat and gave Marcus a meaningful look. Mama Dorothy, she began in that sweet voice that I now know meant trouble was coming. We need to discuss the wedding photos. What about them, baby? Well, you know how important these pictures are. They're going to be treasured family heirlooms, passed down for generations. Our children and grandchildren will look at these photos to see what our wedding was like. She paused, glancing at Marcus, who was suddenly very interested in his phone. And we want them to be absolutely perfect. I nodded, still not seeing where this was going. The thing is, she continued, the photographer we hired specializes in a very specific aesthetic, very elegant, very polished. And we're worried that having too many, how do I put this delicately, older people in the main ceremony photos might throw off the whole vibe. My blood started to simmer, but I kept my voice level. What exactly are you saying, Ashley? She sighed dramatically, like this conversation was just as hard for her as it was for me. We think it would be better if you sat in the back during the ceremony. You know, away from where the main photos will be taken. And maybe you could skip the reception photos altogether. I mean, no offense, but at your age and with your look, it might be better if the pictures focused on the younger, more photogenic family members. The room went dead silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of traffic, my own heart pounding in my ears. Marcus was staring at his fiancée like he'd never seen her before. Ashley, he started, but she held up her hand. I'm just being practical, Marcus. Your mother is, well, she's an eyesore. There, I said it. She's old. She dresses like she's still working at that hospital, and her hair? Ashley wrinkled her nose. When people look at our wedding photos years from now, do you really want them focusing on her instead of us? That's when something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like tectonic plates moving deep underground right before an earthquake. I looked at this girl who I'd spent $60,000 on. This girl I'd treated like my own daughter, and I saw her clearly for the first time. I see, I said quietly. You understand, don't you, Mama Dorothy? It's nothing personal. It's just about maintaining the aesthetic we're going for. I stood up slowly, my arthritis making my knees creak, and looked down at Ashley's expectant face. Then I looked at my son, who was staring at the floor like he might find some courage down there. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I understand more than you know. I walked out of their apartment that day, and I didn't say another word. But understand this, just because I was quiet didn't mean I was done. I was just getting started. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, James Richardson. James and I went way back. I'd helped take care of his mama when she was dying of cancer, sitting with her during her chemo treatments when he couldn't get time off work. He'd been trying to repay that kindness ever since. Dorothy, he said when I told him what happened, that girl has some nerve. What do you want to do about it? I want to know exactly what my legal options are, I said. And James? I want to know them today. Turns out I had more options than I'd realized. See, I'd been paying for everything with checks from my account, and I'd kept meticulous records. Every vendor, every deposit, every payment. It was all documented. And legally speaking, those were gifts I'd given for a specific purpose. If that purpose was no longer being fulfilled in the way I'd intended, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The legal stuff was just one part of my plan. The second thing I did was start making some phone calls. After 45 years of living in the same community, working at the same hospital, going to the same church, you know a lot of people, and people talk. It didn't take long to learn some interesting things about Ashley's family. Turns out, her daddy's business wasn't just going through a rough patch, it was going through bankruptcy proceedings. The family money she'd been bragging about? Most of it was gone, tied up in legal battles and debt restructuring. But here's the thing that really got my attention. Ashley had been telling people that I was paying for the wedding because I was desperate to stay relevant in Marcus's life, that I was buying my way into their good graces because I knew they were going to cut me out otherwise. Child, let me tell you, I have never in my life been so insulted. The third thing I did was reach out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My nephew Calvin, who happened to work in event planning in Atlanta. Calvin owed me a favor from when I'd helped him get back on his feet after his divorce, and he was more than happy to return it. Auntie D, he said when I explained the situation, you know I got connections all over this city. What you need me to do? What I needed him to do was simple. I needed him to document everything. Every vendor I'd paid, every service I'd arranged, every detail of this wedding that my money had made possible. And I needed him to be ready to make some phone calls at a moment's notice. The wedding was now 2 weeks away, and Ashley was in full panic mode about final details. She'd been calling me daily, that fake sweetness back in her voice, asking about payments and arrangements. I'd been answering her questions politely, confirming that yes, everything was taken care of. Yes, all the vendors had been paid. Yes, her dream wedding was going to be perfect. What I didn't tell her was that I'd been having some very interesting conversations with those vendors. You see, most of the contracts were in my name, since my checks had paid the deposits, and many of those contracts had clauses about changes in circumstances, cancellations, and, most importantly, what happens when the person paying for services is no longer comfortable with how those services are being used. I spent that week quietly, methodically, going through every contract, every agreement, every arrangement. James reviewed everything to make sure I was on solid legal ground. Calvin reached out to his contacts to document the scope of what I'd paid for, and I practiced what I was going to say. The Thursday before the wedding, Ashley called me, panic clear in her voice. Mama Dorothy, we have a problem. The florist is saying there's some issue with our order, and they want to talk to you since you're the one who paid the deposit. Can you call them today? Of course, baby, I said. I'll handle it right away. I did call the florist, and the caterer, and the venue coordinator, and the band, and every single vendor who was supposed to make Ashley's dream wedding happen. The conversation went pretty much the same with each of them. Hello, this is Dorothy Washington. I've been paying for services for the Ashley Marcus wedding on Saturday. Yes, that's right. Well, I'm calling because there's been a change in circumstances, and I need to cancel my participation. Yes, I understand there may be fees involved, and I'm prepared to handle that. What I need to know is what options the couple has for continuing with a scaled-back version if they can pay for it themselves. I see. No, I understand completely. Thank you so much for your professionalism. By Friday morning, I had a complete picture of what Ashley's dream wedding would look like without my financial backing. The venue? They could keep the space since it was paid for, but the premium decorating package, upgraded lighting, and enhanced sound system required additional payment to continue. The caterer? The basic meal was covered, but the five-course gourmet menu, premium bar service, and specialized dietary accommodations would revert to a simple buffet and cash bar without additional funds. The flowers? The elaborate arrangements I'd paid for were canceled, but the couple could purchase basic centerpieces if they could cover the cost. The band? The jazz ensemble was out, but they could have a DJ with a basic sound system for an additional fee. The photographer? Still booked, But the premium package with multiple locations and extended hours was no longer available. Ashley's designer dress? Still hers, since it had been purchased outright. But the custom alterations, specialized undergarments, and professional hair and makeup team were separate services that would need to be paid for. In other words, instead of the $85,000 fairy tale wedding, Ashley was looking at a basic ceremony with cafeteria food and a DJ playing off his iPhone. But I wasn't done yet. Friday evening, Ashley called me, and she was crying. Mama Dorothy, I don't understand what's happening. All the vendors are saying there are problems with payments, and they're talking about changing everything. The wedding is tomorrow. What are we going to do? Oh, honey, I said, my voice dripping with the same fake concern she'd been giving me for months. That sounds so stressful. What did they say exactly? Through her tears, she explained how everything was falling apart, how the florist was talking about basic arrangements only, how the caterer was mentioning simplified menu options, how her perfect wedding was turning into a nightmare. I don't understand how this could happen, she sobbed. You said everything was paid for. And it was, baby. When I thought I was paying for my son's wedding, when I thought I was contributing to a celebration that would include me. There was silence on the other end of the line. But Ashley, honey, you helped me understand something important. You helped me see that I'm just an old eyesore who doesn't belong in your perfect pictures. And if I don't belong in the pictures, well, I started thinking maybe my money doesn't belong in the wedding either. What? What are you saying? I'm saying that when you told me I was too old, too ugly, and too much of an embarrassment to be part of your special day, you made a choice. You chose to have a wedding without Dorothy Washington in it. So that's what you're getting. A wedding without Dorothy Washington. All of Dorothy Washington. The silence stretched out so long I thought she might have hung up. You can't do this, she finally whispered. Oh, but I can. And I did. See, when you pay for something, you get to decide how it's used. And I've decided that my money will no longer be used for an event where I'm considered an eyesore. But the wedding is tomorrow. Yes, it is. And you'll have a wedding, Ashley. Just not the one you planned. You'll have the wedding that you and Marcus can afford together, as husband and wife should. I think there's something beautiful about that, don't you? She hung up on me then, but not before I heard her start wailing in the background. 20 minutes later, Marcus called. Mama, what did you do? I stopped being your family's ATM, I said simply. Son, I love you more than life itself, but I will not be disrespected in my own investment. Ashley's having a breakdown. She's talking about calling off the wedding. Then maybe she's not the woman you should be marrying. There was a long pause. Mama, I didn't know she was going to say those things to you. If I had known, but you did know, Marcus. You were sitting right there when she called me an eyesore. You were right there when she said I was too old and too ugly for her precious photographs. And you know what you did? Nothing. You said nothing. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. I was in shock, Mama. I couldn't believe she would say something like that. Well, now you know who you're marrying. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Saturday morning came, and I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept in. No early morning phone calls from Ashley about last-minute crises. No rushing around to handle vendor issues. No stress about whether every detail was perfect. Around noon, Calvin called me. Auntie D, you need to know. I got some friends who work at that venue, and they're telling me stories. What kind of stories? Well, turns out Ashley's family showed up this morning with their checkbook, trying to reinstate all the premium services. But most of the vendors had already committed those resources elsewhere when the orders got canceled yesterday. The florist had already sold off the expensive arrangements to another wedding. The catering company had already reassigned their premium staff to a different event. The jazz band had already taken another gig. I felt a little thrill of satisfaction. So, what's happening? From what I hear, they're scrambling to put together something, but it's not going to be anything like what she planned. Basic everything, and Ashley is not handling it well. Around 3 o'clock, my church friend Gladys called. She'd been invited to the wedding and was calling from the venue. Dorothy, honey, I don't know what happened between you and that girl, but this wedding is a mess. The flowers look like they came from the grocery store. The food is barely a step above McDonald's, and Ashley looks like she's been crying for a week. Where are you? I'm at home, Gladys, where I belong. Well, that girl keeps asking everyone if they've seen you. She looks downright frantic. That evening, Marcus came to see me. He looked exhausted. How was the wedding, son? He sat down heavily in my living room chair, the same chair he'd sat in as a little boy when he needed to talk to his mama about something serious. It was difficult. Ashley spent the whole day crying about how everything was ruined. Her parents were furious about having to pay for things at the last minute. Half the guests were asking where you were, and I spent my wedding day watching my new wife blame everyone but herself for the disaster. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you, Mama? Are you really sorry? I looked at my son, my baby boy who was now a grown man with a wife and his own life, and I gave him the honest answer. I'm sorry that you married someone who could call your mother an eyesore and think that was acceptable. I'm sorry that you stood by and let it happen. But am I sorry that I refused to fund my own humiliation? No, son, I'm not sorry about that at all. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. She wants me to talk to you about the money. What money would that be? The money you took back. She says you owe us for ruining the wedding. I laughed then, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. Son, let me explain something to you about money. When someone gives you a gift, it's yours to keep. But when someone pays for services on your behalf and you insult them so badly that they choose to stop paying for those services, that's not theft. That's consequences. But Mama, Marcus, listen to me. I spent $60,000 trying to make that girl happy. $60,000 that I earned cleaning hospital floors and changing bed sheets and working double shifts so you could have a better life. And when I asked for nothing in return except basic respect, she called me an eyesore. My son was quiet for a long moment. She says she didn't mean it the way it sounded. How many ways are there to mean eyesore, Marcus? He didn't have an answer for that. Son, I want you to be happy. I want your marriage to work, but I will not be disrespected by someone who thinks my money is good enough, but my presence isn't. Marcus left that night without resolving anything, and honestly, I was okay with that. Some lessons take time to sink in. Over the next few weeks, I heard through the grapevine what was happening with the newlyweds. Ashley's parents were struggling financially even more than expected. The last-minute wedding expenses had pushed them further into debt. Ashley herself was having trouble adjusting to the reality that her fairy tale wedding had turned into a basic ceremony, and she was blaming me to anyone who would listen. But here's what she didn't know. I'd been having conversations with some of those anyone who would listens. See, Ashley had made a mistake that a lot of young people make. She'd assumed that older people don't have social networks. She thought she could trash talk me around town without consequences. Because who was I gonna tell? Who would care about the complaints of some old hospital worker? What she didn't realize was that after 45 years in the same community, I knew everyone. The people at church, the folks at the grocery store, the women at the beauty salon, the families whose loved ones I'd cared for at the hospital. I had relationships everywhere. And when someone starts telling people that Dorothy Washington is a bitter old woman who ruined their wedding out of jealousy, well, those people had some things to say about that. That girl doesn't know Dorothy, I heard from Gladys that people were saying. Dorothy Washington has helped more families in this community than anyone I know. If Dorothy pulled her money from that wedding, that girl must have done something terrible. Came from my church sisters. I've known Dorothy for 20 years, and I've never seen her treat anyone unfairly. If she cut off that wedding, there's more to this story, said the ladies at the beauty salon. Within a month, Ashley's version of events had been thoroughly contradicted by a community that knew my character. Instead of sympathy for the bride, whose wedding was ruined by a jealous mother-in-law, she found herself facing questions about what she could have possibly done to make Dorothy Washington, known for her generosity and kindness, withdraw her support. But the real turning point came 6 weeks after the wedding, when Marcus came to see me again. "Mama, we need to talk." "About what, son?" "About Ashley, about our marriage, about what happened." He looked tired, older somehow, like the last few weeks had aged him. "She's been different since the wedding, angry all the time, blaming everyone for how things went. And yesterday, she said something that made me understand what you were trying to tell me." "What did she say?" Marcus hesitated, like the words were hard to get out. "She said that if you really loved our family, you would have just accepted being pushed to the background, that a good mother-in-law would have been grateful to be included at all, even if it meant sitting in the back and staying out of the photos." I felt that familiar anger rising up, but I kept my voice calm. "And what did you say to that?" "I said that sounded exactly like what she told you before, and I was starting to understand why you did what you did. And? And she told me that I needed to choose between being a mama's boy and being a husband, that if I couldn't put her first in everything, maybe we'd made a mistake getting married." I watched my son's face as he told me this, and I saw the moment he finally understood what I'd been trying to protect him from. "So, what are you gonna do, Marcus?" "I don't know, Mama. I love her, but I can't live with someone who thinks loving you makes me less of a man. And I can't build a marriage with someone who has so little respect for the woman who raised me." "Son, I can't make this decision for you, but I can tell you this. A woman who really loves you will love the people who shaped you into the man she fell for. She doesn't have to agree with me about everything, but she should respect what I mean to you." That conversation happened on a Tuesday. By Friday, Marcus was staying in my guest room. "It's temporary," he said, bringing in a suitcase, "just until we figure out what we're doing." But temporary turned into 2 weeks, then a month, then 2 months. And during that time, my son and I had the kinds of conversations we should have had before he got married. We talked about respect and boundaries and what it means to build a family that honors the one you came from while creating something new. We talked about the difference between compromise and capitulation, between love and enabling, between supporting your spouse and betraying your values. And slowly, I watched Marcus remember who he was before Ashley started telling him who he should be. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Ashley fought it, of course, trying to claim that Marcus had abandoned her, that I had poisoned him against her, that she deserved compensation for the emotional trauma of having her wedding ruined. But here's the thing about the truth. It has a way of coming out in legal proceedings. When Ashley's lawyer tried to argue that I had maliciously destroyed the wedding, James Richardson was ready with documentation of every conversation, every payment, every contract. The court got to hear exactly what Ashley had said to me, exactly how she had treated me, and exactly what sequence of events had led to my decision to withdraw funding. The judge, a black woman about my age, listened to all the testimony, and then made a statement I'll never forget. It appears to me that Mrs. Washington invested significantly in what she believed was a family celebration, only to be told that her presence would diminish that celebration. Her decision to withdraw financial support after being insulted and excluded seems not only reasonable but predictable. The plaintiff appears to want the benefits of family support without extending family respect, and that is not how family works. Ashley walked away from that marriage with exactly what she'd brought into it: nothing. And Marcus walked away with a lesson about the cost of not standing up for the people who love you. Today, 2 years later, Marcus is in a relationship with a woman named Keisha, who teaches third grade and makes the most amazing sweet potato pie I've ever tasted outside of my own kitchen. When she met me, the first thing she said was, "Mrs. Washington, Marcus has told me so much about you. I've been looking forward to meeting the woman who raised such a good man." And when they got engaged last month, Keisha asked me to help her choose her wedding dress. "I want you to be part of everything," she said. "You're going to be my family too, and family helps family." Their wedding is planned for next spring. It won't cost $85,000. They're paying for it themselves, like adults should. But it's going to be beautiful because it's going to be filled with people who love and respect each other. And yes, I'll be in all the photos, front and center, where family belongs. As for Ashley, I heard she moved back in with her parents after the divorce. Someone told me she's working at a department store now, trying to rebuild her life. I don't wish her harm. I'm not that kind of person. But I hope she learned something from all this. You see, the thing about calling someone an eyesore is that it says nothing about them and everything about you. It tells the world that you're the kind of person who values appearance over character, surface over substance, image over integrity. And when you treat family that way, when you try to push aside the people who sacrificed for you because they don't fit your perfect picture, you don't just lose their support. You lose the foundation that real happiness is built on. I'm 75 now, and I've learned that respect isn't about age or money or how you look in photographs. It's about recognizing the worth in every person, especially the ones who've earned their place in your life through love and sacrifice. Ashley called me an eyesore because she thought I was too old, too plain, too much of an embarrassment for her perfect day. But here's what she didn't understand. I wasn't an eyesore in her perfect day. I was the foundation it was built on. And when you kick out the foundation, everything else comes tumbling down. That's the real nightmare I gave her. Not revenge, but consequence. Not cruelty, but clarity. Not destruction, but the simple reality that disrespect has a price, and some prices are too high to pay. The best part? I'm not bitter about any of it. I'm grateful. Grateful that I found out who Ashley really was before I spent any more of my money or my heart on someone who didn't value either. Grateful that Marcus learned the lesson before it was too late to find real love. And grateful that I stood up for myself when it mattered most. Because at the end of the day, that's what this whole story is really about. Knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you are. I may be 75 years old, and I may not be magazine cover pretty, but I am not an eyesore. I am a woman who raised a good man, who worked hard for everything I have, who loves deeply and stands firmly on my principles. And if that's not beautiful enough for someone's wedding photos, then that someone isn't beautiful enough for my family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go help my future daughter-in-law pick out centerpieces. She wants my opinion on everything because that's what family does. They include each other, they value each other, and they make sure everyone knows they belong. That's how you build something that lasts. Not with perfect pictures, but with perfect love. And honey, let me tell you, that kind of love is anything but an eyesore. It's the most beautiful thing in the world.